Okay, so what we'll be talking about today is who gets reported. We're going to go over those filing deadlines. These are the filing deadlines that I found through the IRS website. Make sure you double check them on your own. This is just what I saw on the IRS website. We're going to talk about the Promas tax module. So we're going to switch over to the software and go over the tax module, how it works. We're going to talk about some common errors that you might see in Promas and how you would fix those errors. And then we're going to just go review how to print the 1099s and the 1096 form. If you are filing electronically, we'll talk about how to do that. And then we'll take a little bit of time, depending on how much time we have at the end, to go over the end of year owner statements. So this is what we'll be going over in today's webinar. So first of all, who gets reported? First is vendors. If you're not aware, vendors are using a form called 1099 NEC this year. And this year, it is now 3 per page versus 2 per page. So that is something you want to make sure you have on your forms, is that it's the one with 3 per page. The vendor 1099s are based on the vendor payments you do throughout the year. So if you ever do a vendor payment that is not to the vendor itself, it's maybe you're using the one-time payee, it's not going to get counted. You have to use the vendor profile. If you need to do any kind of adjustments, you can do it through the software, and I'll show you when we do switch over to the software under AP and then adjust vendor payments. Next, we have owners. Owners used Form 1099 miscellaneous. Owner income is going to be based on anything in Promas marked as taxable income. So right now what you have on your screen, what we're looking at together, is a report called Chart of Accounts. You can find this under Reports and then Miscellaneous Reports, and it's called Chart of Accounts. So you might want to run this and look to see what you have marked as taxable income, and make sure it's what you had intended to have as taxable income, because all of those codes are going to report under the 1099. So if there's anything there that shouldn't be there, or anything that's missing, it's very easy to change. If you have any questions, call us, but you can change the account codes to match what you want to be reported. And lastly, tenants are going to be reported. They use Form 1099 interest, INT. Not a lot of people use these. If you have questions about this, please feel free to let us know. And here is a chart of the deadlines. So the vendors which are using Form NEC, to the recipients, to IRS, whether it's by mail or electronically, everything is due at the end of this month. So it's really important that you know that vendors are due to the IRS at the end of this month. Miscellaneous is due, miscellaneous and tenants, sorry, owners and tenants. They're due to your recipients at the end of January, but they're not due to the IRS until later. So if you're doing it by mail, they're due at the end of February. If you're filing electronically, they're due at the end of March. We highly recommend not sending owners and tenants at the end of this month, because there's a lot of times a mistake, and your owners typically will let you know what the mistake is after January ends. So it's really nice to have that like buffer to fix it before sending it to the IRS, so you don't have to send a bunch of corrections to the IRS. So if you're filing by mail, give yourself to the end of February. If you're filing electronically, you have till the end of March. So you have a little bit of time for your owners to actually look at what you sent them and tell you that there is a problem. All right, so now we're going to switch over to Promas. So I'll close this. And this is the logon screen for Promas. If you are using our cloud version, you have been updated to our latest software already. If you are using our desktop version, you do need to download the software yourself from our website. Here at the bottom, you can see it's release 2022.1 build 3. That is the tax release that you should be using before you do your 1099s. So if you have any questions on how to update, let us know, but that is, if you're on something older than this, it's not going to work correctly. All right, so here we are. We're going to go into mailings and tax reporting. There is this message that will appear that says the tax reporting figures are unchanged from the last time they were loaded or edited. This means that if you open the program in, say, November or December to figure out how many forms you needed to buy, it calculated everything based on those dates, and it will not recalculate it unless you tell it to do so. So it's really important to come into Promise and click on Reload Returns and then start over. What this will do is force Promise to recalculate everything, so you're not getting just a few months of the year, you're getting the whole year. So looking at this screen, we can see that the tax year is 2021. There is a settings to change that, but you really don't need to mess with that. There are various options for a reporting group, which will include all your taxpayers, which is what it comes up by default. But you can also subdivide it. So you can do vendors only, owners only, tenants only, or you can do owners and tenants together, but without the vendors. And this is really helpful since vendors are due in January and owners and tenants are due later on, so that you can separate them. There is display returns. You can see all the returns, the reported returns, printed returns, or unreported returns. A limit to filter, you can choose no filter, below reporting limit, reporting error, marked do not print, marked override, marked skip. So depending on how you're navigating through it, these can be really helpful. For example, if you want to see everyone who has an error, it's really helpful to go to the reporting error and just see who has an error. Now you can see on my screen, everyone has an error. That's something that we're going to fix, but it is very helpful to see if you just have a handful of them. We have some buttons here, all returns, vendors only, owners and tenants. So if we click on these, it's similar to coming over here and clicking over. So they're very similar. So you can use these buttons to change what you see on your screen. Just keep in mind that what you see on your screen is what will print. So if you're printing 1099s, what you see is what will print. If you're generating the tax files, what you see is what's going to get generated. So just keep that in mind that if you are intending to do an electronic file for everything and you only are seeing vendors on your screen, you're only going to get vendors in your file. So that's important to know. Reload returns will only be affected if you, based on what's on your screen, unless you click start over. So you can reload the dollar amounts, you can reload taxpayer information, and you can exclude various options. So you can exclude people that you overrode, or you can exclude returns that are marked skipped. So you would mark your options, say you wanted to reload the amounts, but don't mess with anyone that is skipped, and then update records. You also have the option to do print none. This is really helpful when you're doing your test printing. Everyone's printer is different. Some people need to have their printer go up a little, some people need to go down a little. So we recommend that everyone click print none and then unmark a few and then print a sample. So for vendors, you probably want to unmark about 5 or 6 so that it will print 2 pages worth of 1099s, because we have found that the second page is a little bit different than the first. So the second and going forward is a little different than the first page. So it's helpful to see more than one page. And then same with vendors, you want to print at least 3 or 4 of them to see what it will look like. We have an order tax form. So if you have not ordered your tax forms, you can use this button to go to promiseforms.com and order tax forms. Print tax forms, we have some options here. You can print your 1099 copy, your 1096 copy, print substitute 1099s. And here's another order button. We will come back to this. We actually can't do this function yet because all of mine have errors. And then generate tax files. So this is for people who are filing electronically. You can generate a tax file, or you can do your TIN matching. Here in this area here are all of the returns. So I actually am working on a very small database. You can actually even see the bottom. Your database will probably have more. So you can just scroll down until you find who you're looking for. You can also use our report button. You can print this out too, but we'll just preview it for now. And it will show you basically what you were looking at on the screen. So if you have a lot of vendors, a lot of owners, sometimes it's really helpful to print this out and review it on the paper because it's a little bit easier to see. And I had vendors marked, so I'm only seeing vendors right now. So this is an example of how what you see on your screen is what you're going to get exported. So if I were to click all returns and then report, you'll see that it's going to look a little different. So you can see I have my owners, my tenants, and my vendors. So this is also really helpful if you have not ordered your forms yet to find out how many you need. So at the very bottom, there's a total record count. So for my database, I would need 25 total forms, but I would need 11 for vendors, 2 for tenants, and 12 for owners. Okay, so next we're going to go on to how to fix errors. So you can see absolutely everyone has an error. To find out what an error is, really you just have to click on someone. So if you click on the name, it will expand, and we can see here that it says error, filer address truncated. It means that the filer's address, or your address, the company's address, is too long. So in order to fix that, you would need to go into setup. So you'd go to the top and click setup, and then company. So under setup company, you have your taxpayer ID, your taxpayer name, your phone number, and your mailing address. So in the error message, it said my address was too long. And the reason is because I accidentally put the company name as part of it when it's not needed. So I just need to get rid of that. Now I'm going to copy this forward. So now it's shorter. I don't need the company name in the first mailing address line because it's going to pull from, it's going to pull from the taxpayer name. So I would save that. You'll notice that nothing changed. In order for any effects from the change done outside of the module to be reflected, you have to reload the returns. Well, as soon as you open this and even going forward, it ignores everything that you're doing in the software. So if you're adding more rent, if you're changing someone's name, someone's ID, it completely ignores you. So you have to click on reload returns to tell it that you did something outside of this module. For the company, you have to click start over. So I did make that address shorter, and I did click start over. So now you can see that the error messages are primarily gone. If I use my limiting drop-down menu to be reporting error, you can see that I have 2. I have one for this owner and one for this owner. And again, if you click on the name, you can see what the error message is. So this error message says taxpayer address truncated. So previously we're looking at filer address truncated, which meant the company. Taxpayer address truncated means the owner or the vendor or the tenant. So there's 2 ways that you can go about fixing this kind of error. The first way is inside of the text module. Excuse me. So if you do it inside of the tax module, that means that you would click on edit 1099, you would override the 1099 information. You would unmark the error in 1099 checkbox, and you would fix the address here. Now, sometimes this can be really confusing because you don't see the whole address is already cut off. You would primarily want to do this if it's a really hard address to deliver to, but you need it shorter for the IRS. If you can make the owner's address shorter and the mailman will still deliver their mail, we recommend changing their address in their owner profile so that you don't have to keep fixing this year after year. But if you're not able to do that, maybe it's like a foreign address. So if I close that without changing it, here's my one with the foreign address actually. So I'm going to override it and unmark the error. So like for this one, it might be really hard to change it in such a way where they'll still deliver the mail. So I have it written down on a separate paper because this is actually truncated. So I'm going to change this to be in care of abbreviation. You can do various abbreviations. Maybe get rid of some unnecessary punctuation. So you can make it fit, but you do need to know what the address is from outside of the module to bring it into this. So if you have it on paper, something that can be helpful. And again, this is when you would use it if you can't really get the mailman to deliver it otherwise. So if I save that, you can see that I had two on here and now the one owner is gone. So the other way that you can edit it is to click Edit Taxpayer. Now this will bring you to the owner or vendor's profile. So if there's a way to change the address where, so normally you can use like abbreviations. So here, Northwest can be NW, Avenue can be AVE. I can change this also. And the mailman will still deliver this. There's not going to be any issue. And this is going to save me a lot of time in future years because I'm not going to have to keep coming in and changing it and fixing it year after year. So when I save this, it's going to ask me if I want to update it, and I'll say yes. And that one is now gone too. There's now nothing on my screen because I have it limited to reporting error, and I've now gone through and corrected my errors. So you may find that you have a few errors to do or a lot of errors to do. Hopefully, if you have a lot of errors to do, if you fix them in the owner or vendor profiles, you won't have to do it next year. You do want to come in here and choose reporting error to make sure you don't have any errors. So now we're going to move on to printing. So now that I have no errors, I'm going to click on All Returns. And then let's see what our tax forms look like. So what you would do is come and click on Print Tax Forms, and then Print Form 1099 Copies. Here it's going to tell you what printer it's going to go to, so you can choose your printer. If you're doing copy A, this is the one that goes to the IRS. You would not mark copy B. But if you're sending the one that's going out to the owners or the vendors, you do want to mark this, and this will hide part of their Social Security since it's going through the mail to the public. You can also do a micro adjust down. So if you type in the number 100, it's going to move all of the printing on the form 1 inch down on the paper. If you need it to go up on the paper, you put a minus sign and then however much you want it to move up. So if you put in -20, it would move up a little bit. If you want to go down a little bit, make it go down a little bit. It is really helpful if it's not lining up to start printing on blank paper so you don't ruin all your forms. Just print it on the blank paper and hold it up to a light with the form behind it and see how far off or close you are, and then do as many tries as you can get. Once you get it to the right number, click Make Default so that as you print the forms, it just remembers it for you. And just so we can see what it looks like, here are the 1099 NEC. So this is the vendor form. You can see that there's 1, 2, 3 on one page. And if we look at the owners, we can see that there's 2. So here's 1 and then 2. And this is basically what your forms will look like for the red copy, the copy A. And then similar, when you're generating the tax forms, you click this button when you are ready, and you click on Generate Tax Reporting File. You would fill in your transmitter control number, your name control, your contact name and phone number, and email. Make sure you do not mark this create a test file. That is not for you to mark. It won't go through correctly if you mark it. So just make sure it's not marked. And then you would compile it and click OK. And it will open up the location to where it saved it to. So here it saved it in my my users folder. You probably want to put this somewhere different. So somewhere that it is easier to find so that you can actually find it to upload it to the IRS Fire website. You can also print a 1096 form, and you can print substitute 1099 forms. So this is what the 1099 substitute form looks like. This is something that you could either print and mail out to owners, or you can also email them. If you're going to only send it electronically, you do have to have consent from the owner. But if you do it in also with the form, you can send this by however you're publishing. So if you're using Hero PM or if you're just sending by email, you can also include this. So if you did want to publish or email it, instead of previewing it on our screen like we just did, you would click this publish button here. So we clicked on print tax forms, print substitute 1099s, and then publish. And what this will do is it will create them as individual documents to be sent out. Now, again, I have a small database. This might take a little bit longer for you because 23 is pretty small. So it does take a second for it to figure it out. So that is the majority of the tax module, how to print them, how to generate the files, how to work with it to come up with what you need. Just make sure you really pay attention to the fact that it only looks at the numbers once. So if you did open it in 2021, it probably didn't capture the whole year. So pretty much everyone should start by clicking reload returns and then start over. If you have a file or address truncated and everyone has an error message, stop what you're doing, fix your address, come in and click reload returns and start over so that you can then start going through everyone. So we're going to take a quick look at other parts of the software. So I'm going to close this. So you can also adjust vendor payments. So the way that you do that is under AP and then adjust vendor payments. This is really helpful if a vendor maybe got paid some other way, or maybe they were a one-time payee at first and then you made them a vendor, or something happened. You can come in here and you can correct their payment amount. So you'd correct the year to be 2021. It doesn't really matter what year you, day you pick, it just matters what year you pick. You would choose which vendor it was. So you'd pick from your list of vendors. The ledger is required, but it doesn't matter. You can pick anyone, you can pick the management group. It doesn't show up on the owner's ledger, it doesn't show up, it doesn't really affect anyone. It just is required for the accounting portion. And you can increase a vendor payment or decrease a vendor payment by however much money you need to. And you can say why. This transaction will show up in vendor history, but not on an owner statement. You can also see what will happen, the calculation for the payments for the prior year, the adjustment that you're making, whether it's going up or down, and then the final payment. So if I changed it, you can see that then the final payment amount decrease versus increasing when I had increase marked. And then you would post a transaction, or if you had more of them to do, you would click new and just go through them. The other thing I wanted to show you guys is the owner profile. So just in case you didn't know, the 1099 information is in each and every owner profile. So over here, there's taxpayer ID. These are all made up taxpayer IDs. I pretty much just smacked my keyboard. I made up completely random numbers, but if you do want an owner or vendor to receive a 1099 or to be eligible for one, you do have to mark send 1099 and you do have to tax in a taxpayer ID. If they have a different taxpayer name than what's in their profile, maybe you have a wife and a husband's name, but it's all going to be reported under the husband's name, you probably want to fill in their correct taxpayer name for the IRS in this box here. And the last item on our agenda is to review owner statements. So you've got all your 1099s going. You want to send them a nice report for their entire year. We recommend sending them an end of year owner statement. So if we go under setup and look at owner statements, by default, you should have this. It's called end of year. The title is yearly statement summary, but you can always come in here and change that to something if you like something different. The idea of this report is the body is going to break it out by unit, but in a summary version. And the very top is going to be an owner balance summary. So it's going to show all of the owner's information in a summary. So it's all a very summarized report, but it'll do everything at the top and then by unit at the bottom. So this is really helpful to see everything that happened over the year in a glance. So let's go ahead and see what that looks like. So you would go into mailings and choose owner statements. You would pick an override statement type of end of year. And you'd probably want to pick for all owners and for all ledgers. And the reason is because you may have had an owner for half a year or a few months or most of the year, but maybe not anymore. And you want to include them in getting a statement because they are getting a 1099. And if you want to, you can also add a statement note. Whatever information you might want to include as part of their statement. It will show up at the top and we'll see what that looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. We'll want to pick the dates for all of 2021. So you can either just change them here or you can use our drop down and choose last year. Just for the sake of this webinar, I want to show you just one owner, just so it's a little easier to view. But when you're doing this, you would not restrict it to anyone. So here is the preview of the report. You can see the note I placed is right here at the top. So if there's anything that you just want to say to the owner, that's going to be at the very top, you can put it there. You can see here is the summary of the owner. So this is everything that happened for the owner, all of his income, all of his expenses. The rent amount should match his 1099 amount. You can see he also has something called trash removal, which is an income. But when we were reviewing how we set up the account codes, and I can show you that in a second, only late fee and rent were included. So make sure you are aware of what you have marked as taxable income, because that's what's going to match up to the owner statement to the 1099 form. You can also see that it's broken out. So here's just owner transactions, which are his contribution and his distribution. And then it's broken out by unit. So everything that happened for this one unit and then everything that happened for this unit. Now, if you wanted to mail these, you would just print them all out, stuff in envelopes, and there you go. If you wanted to email them or publish them here PM, instead of clicking preview, you would click publish. And if you wanted to, you could change this to a different name. Whatever you think works best, and then run. And it gets added to the local publishing folder. So in order to get those to send, you would go into publishing and click on publish or email documents. So I already have my email set up. So it's going to start sending out all of those 1099 substitute forms and the owner statement that I just created. And this is what it would look like. If you have any questions on how I just did this, there are some documents in the handout section on the right-hand panel of your screen. Also, feel free to email us or let us know if you have any questions. So while that runs, you don't actually have to watch it. We can look at that report I was telling you about. So if you go into reports and then miscellaneous reports, there's this really handy report here called chart of accounts. So this is pretty good to review, just so you are aware of what's going to appear on your 1099. So here on mine, I have rent and late fee. This is typically what the IRS wants to see. You really should check with a local tax authority or local CPA to make sure that your chart of accounts is set up correctly. Other things that are considered income, like the application fee or NSF fee, these things are not going to be reported on my 1099 because they're not in the taxable income section. So if you have any questions about why one is not matching the other, it's typically one of two things. One, the thing you're looking at is not considered taxable income, or two, the tax reporting screen was open before the year ended and it wasn't included, and you should refresh the numbers by clicking reload returns.